The black sedan screeched around the corner, tires smoking on wet concrete. I had the hard drive, proof I didn't steal $2 million. But the man who signed my name to the theft? My mentor, the one who built my career. Now the engine roared closer, and my only way out was a rusted fire escape. The first bullet shattered the window behind me. Rain stung my face as I ran. The audit starts in 40 minutes. If I don't expose the truth by then, I'm finished. And the man who taught me everything? He's the one holding the gun. The scent of wet asphalt and burnt rubber choked the underground garage. David Miller swung his leather briefcase, the metal frame connecting with an attacker's ribs, with a dull thud. Rainwater dripped from the ceiling, turning the concrete floor into a skating rink. A second man lunged, fingers clawing at David's throat. David pivoted, slamming the heavy bags into the masked face. Teeth clicked. A groan echoed off the pillars. Headlights cut through the gloom, blinding and cold. A black sedan roared, tires screaming as it lurched toward him. David lunged behind a structural column. The fender grazed his suit jacket, scraping the concrete with a shriek of twisting metal. The engine revved once more before the car sped toward the exit, leaving David trembling in the sudden silence. He stood there for a moment, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He began to count. 1, 2, 3, 4. The rhythm of the numbers acted as a shield, pushing back the metallic taste of adrenaline. He reached 24 by the time he made it to his SUV. His fingers fumbled with the door handle, the cold steel biting into his palm. Inside the car, the air was thick with the smell of old coffee and the faint, sweet scent of the vanilla air freshener his daughter had picked out. He gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. Someone wanted the drive. Someone knew he had spent the last 72 hours peeling back the layers of the firm's digital ledgers. He didn't wait for the garage security to arrive. He shifted into reverse, the tires chirping on the damp concrete, and sped toward the exit. The humid Charlotte air hit him as he cleared the ramp, a wet wool blanket of 90-degree heat that made his damp shirt cling to his skin like a second skin. He had to get to the office. He had to get to the mainframe before the 10 o'clock bells tolled his professional death. He reached the executive floor 10 minutes late, his lungs burning. The elevator doors hissed open to reveal Kevin Reed. The assistant hovered near the reception desk, his tie crooked and his face the color of spoiled milk. Kevin was a small, twitchy man who perpetually looked as if he were waiting for a blow to land. He was currently apologizing to a stapler he had bumped into. "David, we have a crisis," Kevin stammered, his hands fluttering. David smoothed his torn sleeve, trying to hide the tremble in his hands. "My morning already peaked, Kevin. Give me the short version." "The internal audit team, they're here." Michael Sterling arrived early. They took over the conference room. He's already asking for the logistics logs for Project Clean Sweep. Kevin's eyes darted to the heavy leather briefcase David held. "Is that the drive? David, if they find that on you, it looks like you're stealing company secrets. Let me take it. I can hide it in the mailroom or the basement storage." "Somewhere they won't look." David looked at the young man. Kevin's voice was thick with a desperate, frantic kind of loyalty. He had worked for David for 3 years, always the first to arrive and the last to leave, always ready with a lukewarm cup of hazelnut coffee and a sorry for every minor inconvenience. David felt a surge of relief. He wasn't alone. "I can't let you take the fall if they catch you with it, Kevin," David said, his voice lowering as a group of junior associates scurried past, their faces buried in tablets. "They won't catch me," Kevin whispered, his voice cracking. "I'm the assistant. I'm invisible. You're the target, David. Sterling is already talking about irregularities and unaccounted variables. If you walk in there with that bag, you're handing them the rope to hang you. Please, trust me. David looked at the briefcase. It felt like it weighed 100 pounds. Inside was the decrypted record of $2 million vanishing into a series of shell companies in the Caymans. Money that bore his digital thumbprint. He handed the bag to Kevin. The boy took it with a sharp nod, his fingers brushing David's hand. His skin was clammy. "Thank you, Kevin," David said. "Don't thank me yet," Kevin replied, already turning toward the service stairs. "Just get to your desk. Act like you've been at the gym. I'll handle the drive." David watched him go, feeling a brief, flickering hope. He adjusted his tie, took a deep breath of the stale, filtered office air, and headed toward his glass-walled office. He sat down, the leather chair squeaking under his weight, and powered on his terminal. He needed to see the source. He needed to know how they had bypassed his security protocols to use his signature. He began to dig. His fingers flew across the keys, the rhythmic clicking a comfort in the silent room. He bypassed the surface-level ledgers and dove into the core of the Project Clean Sweep files. The data was a mess, a jagged landscape of diverted funds and erased timestamps. But David was a master of logistics. He saw the patterns where others saw chaos. He pulled up the internal ledger and compared it to the encrypted outgoing logs. There it was. A $2 million transfer, authorized at 3:14 a.m. on a Tuesday. The digital signature was his. It was perfect. It was a mirror image of his own authorization code. But as he traced the routing path back through the internal wiring of the firm, he saw a deviation. The signal hadn't originated from his terminal. It had been jumped through a secondary node. David's breath hitched. He tracked the node's physical address. Room 402, the corner office. The air in the room suddenly felt 20 degrees colder. Room 402 belonged to Robert Henderson. Robert, the man who had hired David out of grad school. Robert, who had stood as the godfather to David's children. Robert, who always straightened his tie exactly 3 times before a meeting. David stared at the screen, the blue light reflecting in his eyes. It wasn't a hacker. It wasn't a glitch. It was a manual override. Robert had used his administrative master key to impersonate David. The betrayal felt like a physical blow to the solar plexus, leaving him gasping for air in the sterile, white-on-white office. He looked out the window at the Charlotte skyline, the bruised purple streetlights beginning to flicker as the morning clouds rolled in. He wasn't just being framed. He was being sacrificed by the only man he had ever truly trusted in this business. The silence was shattered by a heavy, rhythmic thudding. It was the sound of a man who walked with the weight of absolute authority. David didn't need to look up to know who it was. The low, somber humming of a funeral dirge preceded him. The Sterling dirge. Michael Sterling entered the office without knocking. He was a massive man, his suit straining at the shoulders, his silver-flecked hair cropped close to a skull that looked like it was carved from granite. He didn't say hello. He walked to the center of the room and pointed a thick finger at a picture frame on David's desk that was tilted a fraction of an inch to the left. "You're late, Miller," Sterling said, his voice a gravelly baritone. "And your workspace is cluttered. A cluttered desk suggests a cluttered mind. A cluttered mind makes mistakes with decimals." "I had car trouble, Michael," David said, his voice sounding thin even to his own ears. "I didn't realize the audit started at 9. "It starts when I arrive," Sterling replied. He began to hum again, a low vibration that David could feel in the floorboards. "I've already secured the server logs. I'm here for your local cache. And the hard drive you were seen carrying into the building." David's heart skipped. "I don't know what you're talking about." Sterling leaned over the desk, his shadow swallowing David. "Don't play the fool. It doesn't suit your profile. I saw the footage from the garage. You were fighting for that bag like it was your firstborn. Where is it?" I left it in my car," David lied. Sterling's eyes narrowed. He looked like a gargoyle perched over a cathedral. "We'll see. My team is already stripping your SUV. In the meantime, I'll take your workstation." David stood up, his legs feeling like lead. He had to get to the drive. He had to get it before Sterling's hound sniffed it out. He excused himself, claiming he needed water, and slipped out into the hallway. The air was thick with the scent of bleach. Jennifer Hayes, the office manager, was nearby, scrubbing a doorknob with obsessive intensity. He moved toward the maintenance closet, his mind racing. He couldn't go to Kevin. Sterling had eyes everywhere. He reached the ventilation duct near the executive washroom. With a frantic tug, he popped the metal grate. It shrieked, the sound echoing in the marble hallway. He reached inside, his fingers brushing against cold, galvanized steel. He shoved the drive deep into the dark, dusty throat of the building, tucking it behind a heavy damper. As he replaced the grate, he heard the click of a lock. He turned back toward his office, but the door wouldn't budge. He swiped his badge. A red light flashed. Access denied. He tried the door to the stairwell. Access denied. The digital trap had snapped shut. He was locked in the executive corridor, a high-tech cage of glass and steel. The lights overhead began to flicker, pulsing every 4 seconds, casting long, rhythmic shadows that made the hallway look like it was breathing. "David?" He spun around. Sarah Thompson stood at the end of the hall. She was his deputy, a woman of impeccable posture and a voice as smooth as glass. She was crossing her arms tightly over her chest, her usual defensive crouch. "Sarah, thank God. My badge isn't working. The system is glitching." Sarah didn't move. She looked at him with a clinical, detached sort of pity. "It's not a glitch, David. Robert revoked your credentials 10 minutes ago. He said you were a flight risk." "A flight risk?" "Sarah, he's the one who moved the money. I have the proof." Sarah stepped closer, her heels clicking on the tile like a countdown. She pulled out her phone and pressed a button. David's own voice filled the hallway, distorted and tinny but unmistakable. "I said the 2 million. I had to do it, Sarah. The debt was too high. Robert will never know. Just keep the logs clean for me." David felt the world tilt. "I never said that. That's a fake. You edited that." "The auditors won't care about the how, David," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "They only care about the what, and what they have is a confession. I've been recording our lunches for months. It was so easy to stitch the words together. You talk in such predictable units, David. It's like building with blocks." She turned and walked away, her silhouette disappearing into the flickering light of the bullpen. David was alone. He looked at the heavy industrial coffee carafe sitting on a nearby service cart. He gripped the handle, the heat of the glass seeping into his palm. He wasn't going to wait to be led away in handcuffs. He smashed the carafe against the electronic lock of the service elevator. Spark erupted, the smell of ozone filling the air. The doors groaned and slid open a crack. He wedged his fingers into the gap and pulled. The metal bit into his skin, drawing blood, but he didn't stop until he could slip through. He tumbled into the dark, plywood-lined interior of the service elevator. The smell of stale grease and old cardboard was overwhelming. He pressed the button for the basement, but the lift didn't move. Instead, the lights died completely. In the sudden, absolute darkness, he heard it. The sound of someone breathing in the corner. "Who's there?" David whispered. The only answer was the rhythmic pop, pop, pop of knuckles being cracked. Thumb to pinky. Twice. David lunged forward, swinging blindly. His fist connected with something hard, a shoulder, a chest. And then a heavy hand slammed him against the plywood wall. The air left his lungs in a sharp wheeze. He felt a jagged scar across the knuckles of the hand gripping his throat. Michael Davis. Robert's security muscle. "Robert wants the drive, David." The man hissed, his breath smelling of peppermint and tobacco. "Tell me where it is, and maybe you walk out of here. Don't, and you're just another workplace accident." David brought his knee up, catching the man in the groin. The grip loosened. David scrambled for the emergency hatch in the ceiling, his fingers finding the cold metal rim. He hauled himself up into the elevator shaft, the air thick with dust and the humming of the building's heart. He climbed. He counted the rungs of the maintenance ladder. 1, 2, 3. He reached the third floor and kicked open a small access door. He tumbled out into a secluded corridor near the server room. He was covered in soot, his expensive suit ruined, his hands raw. He saw a figure huddled near a water cooler. "Kevin?" The assistant jumped, nearly dropping a stack of papers. "David? You look terrible. They're looking for you everywhere." Sterling called the police. "Now, Kevin, listen to me," David said, grabbing the younger man by the shoulders. "Sarah, she's the one who helped Robert. She's been recording me, and she's played you too." Kevin blinked, his eyes watering. "What do you mean?" "The promotion. The one Robert promised you for helping him with the audit. Sarah's already filled it. I saw the HR filing on her desk. She gave it to her brother, Marcus. You're not getting a seat at the table, Kevin. You're the one they're going to blame for the technical errors once I'm gone. You're the loose thread." Kevin's face went slack. He slumped against the wall, the sorry he usually offered the world dying in his throat. "I did everything he asked. I planted the keylogger. I even helped Jennifer hide the forged ledgers in your desk." "It's not too late," David said, his voice urgent. "Help me get into the server room. We can pull the raw logs, the ones they haven't had time to scrub yet. We can prove it was Robert's terminal." Kevin looked at the door to the server room and then back at David. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a silver key card. "I have secondary credentials, but we have to be fast. The cooling fans, they're so loud in there. No one will hear us, but we won't hear them coming either." They slipped into the server room. The temperature dropped 40 degrees instantly. The roar of 1,000 fans created a wall of white noise that made David's head throb. The air was dry and aggressive, cracking his lips. In the center of the room, one rack was vibrating with a violent, physical force, though its lights were dark. David sat at the terminal, his fingers dancing. He bypassed the local firewalls, diving deep into the kernel of the system. He began to reroute the digital breadcrumbs, pulling the offshore account trails away from his own ID and pinning them back to the source. "Almost there," David shouted over the roar of the fans. "I just need to authorize the data dump to an external." The lights in the server room turned a deep, predatory red. The fans slowed, the roar dropping to a low, menacing hum. The heavy steel door at the far end of the room swung open. Robert Henderson walked in, flanked by 2 armed men in tactical gear. He was straightening his tie. 1, 2, 3. "A valiant effort, David," Robert said, his voice cutting through the hum like a razor. "Truly. Your grasp of logistics is, as always, surgical. But you forgot the most important variable." Robert looked at Kevin. The young man stepped away from David, his slumped posture disappearing, replaced by cold, straight-backed rigidity. "The betrayal regarding the promotion, David," Kevin said, his voice no longer trembling. "That was my idea. I knew if you thought I was a victim too, you'd lead me right to the terminal. You'd show me exactly which files you were trying to use to save yourself." Robert smiled, a warm, fatherly expression that didn't reach his eyes. "You're a good man, David. But a good man is just a tool for those willing to do what is necessary. You've just provided us with the final piece of the puzzle." Kevin reached out and flipped a switch on the side of the terminal. A hidden high-definition camera, mounted directly above the screen, blinked to life. "Smile, David," Robert said. "You're on camera, tampering with the evidence, attempting to frame your mentor for your own greed. The police are in the lobby. Michael Sterling is with them, and they have a live feed of everything you're doing right now." David lunged for the master key card on the lead guard's belt, a desperate animal snarl escaping his throat. He didn't make it halfway. A heavy boot caught him in the ribs, sending him sprawling against a server rack. The cold metal bit into his back. He felt the vibration of the machines through his spine. He was beaten. He was caught. He watched as Robert and Kevin walked out of the room, leaving him on the floor, the red light of the server room bathing him in the color of a crime scene. 5 minutes later, the door opened again. It wasn't the police. It was Michael Sterling. He was alone. He walked over to where David sat, his back against the vibrating rack. He didn't offer a hand. He just stood there, humming that low, somber dirge. "They think they've won," David wheezed, tasting blood in his mouth. "They're loud," Sterling said. "And I don't like loud people. They make mistakes. They leave smudges on the glass." He looked down at David. "You're a numbers man, Miller. Tell me, if a company archives its data every 60 seconds to a secondary site in Chicago, a site that Robert Henderson doesn't even know exists because it was part of an old merger, what happens to the edited logs here?" David froze. The Chicago Ghost server. It was a legacy system, a redundant archive he had set up 5 years ago and then forgotten about. It operated on a separate backbone. It was the only thing in the company that didn't answer to Robert's master key. It would have the unedited originals, David whispered. "I found the connection an hour ago," Sterling said. "I've been waiting to see who would try to delete it. Robert didn't even try. He was too busy setting this stage for you." Sterling leaned down, his face inches from David's. "I don't care about your drama, Miller. I care about the math. And the math says Robert Henderson is a thief." Sterling pulled a small, handheld device from his pocket. "I've bypassed the local lockout. You have 3 minutes before the police break through that door. Trigger the Chicago dump. Send it to the boardroom monitors. Let the board see the unaccounted variables for themselves." David's fingers were numb, but they found the keys. He didn't think about his career. He didn't think about the firm. He thought about the rhythm of the numbers. 21, 22, 23. He hit the final command. The fire suppression system suddenly roared to life, a cloud of white chemical fog filling the room. In the chaos, David slipped out the back service door, moving like a ghost through the building he knew better than anyone. He reached the boardroom just as the lights dimmed for Robert's presentation. The board of directors sat around the massive mahogany table, their faces reflected in the dark, polished wood like ghosts. Richard Wilson was there, meticulously rewriting his wife's grocery list on a yellow pad. Robert stood at the head of the table, his voice a paternal velvet. "It is with a heavy heart that I must report the betrayal of David Miller. As you can see on the screens." The monitors flickered. The video of David in the server room vanished. In its place, a massive scrolling spreadsheet appeared. It was the ghost server log. The room went silent. The data didn't lie. It showed the 3:14 a.m. transfer. It showed the physical MAC address of the originating terminal. Room 402. Robert Henderson's office. It showed the secondary authorization from Jennifer Hayes' computer. The smell of bleach suddenly seemed to fill the room as Jennifer, standing by the door, turned as white as her cleaning rags. "What is this?" Richard Wilson barked, dropping his pen. David walked into the room. He was covered in soot, his face bruised, his shirt torn. He didn't look like an executive. He looked like a man who had crawled through the guts of a machine and come out the other side. "It's the truth, Richard," David said. The numbers finally added up. The police entered the room, but they weren't looking for David. Officer Christopher Taylor, wearing his mismatched Lucky socks, walked straight to Robert Henderson. "Mr. Henderson?" the officer asked, his voice a puzzled inquiry. "So you thought you could just delete the trail? That's a very interesting theory. Would you mind coming with us to discuss the logistics of that?" Robert didn't fight. He didn't even look at David. He just straightened his tie. 1, 2, 3. An hour later, David walked out of the skyscraper. The Carolina sun was blinding, the humidity finally breaking as a cool breeze blew in from the west. He stood on the sidewalk, watching the city move around him. He saw Kevin Reed being led to a squad car. The young man's head bowed, his lips moving in a silent, frantic, "Sorry, sorry, sorry." David reached into his pocket and pulled out his executive badge. He looked at it for a moment, and then set it down on a park bench. He didn't need it. He didn't need the status, the sterile office, or the predictable rhythm of the corporate ladder. He began to walk. He didn't count the steps. He just felt the warmth of the sun on his face and the solid ground beneath his feet. For the first time in his life, the variables didn't matter. He was finally, truly, out of the system.